In South Africa, we get you the news and the newsmakers from Africa. From elections to climate change to innovations and opportunities. As the world's attention shifts, we report from Africa, the heart of the global South. Join me every weekday live on Firstpost. Hello and welcome to Firstpost Africa, where we get you the top stories from the continent and from across the world. I'm Alyson Grange, coming to you live from Durban, South Africa. First, let's take a look at the headlines. Ukraine and European leaders hold a virtual meeting with Donald Trump as they seek to convince the US president to respect Kiev's interests in his upcoming summit with Russia's Vladimir Putin in Alaska. The Philippines says a Chinese fighter jet intercepted one of its aircraft carrying journalists during a patrol over the Scarborough Shoal, days after two Chinese vessels collided in the area for allegedly trying to block a Philippine supply mission. Hamas says Israeli forces are making aggressive incursions into Gaza City after their military approved the framework for a new offensive in the besieged Palestinian territory. Estonia's foreign ministry says it is expelling a Russian diplomat over sanctions violations and other crimes against the Baltic state, prompting Moscow to say it would retaliate. And South Korean prosecutors raid the headquarters of the former party of jailed ex-president Yoon Suk-yeol to gather evidence in an election meddling case against his wife, a day after she is arrested on corruption, stock manipulation, and other charges. Hello and welcome. Let's start with the crisis facing South Africa. US President Donald Trump has slapped 30% tariffs on Africa's biggest economy. These tariffs are the highest in sub-Saharan Africa. The Ramaphosa government is trying to appease Trump, but the US president is not ready to soften his stance. The stakes remain high for South Africa. Trump's tariffs will potentially hit 30,000 jobs in a country where the unemployment rate is over 33%. It's clear that the Ramaphosa government cannot afford to give up. And keeping up with the old saying of try until you succeed, South Africa has prepared a new trade deal for the US. Details of the new offer are not known yet. However, the Ramaphosa government has hinted at increasing imports of US poultry, blueberries and pork. Pretoria remains determined to explain to Trump that South African exports are not a threat to US production. The US is South Africa's third largest trading partner after the European Union and China. However, South African exports account for only 0.25% of the total US imports. South Africa is trying to reason with Trump, a strategy which has rarely worked with the US president. Trump is not happy with South Africa's domestic and international policies. Trump has accused the Ramaphosa government of discriminating against the white people with policies like the Land Expropriation Act and the Black Economic Empowerment Act. The US president is also irked by South Africa's genocide case against America's ally Israel. And one of his biggest issues remains South Africa's BRICS membership. Now, Washington has also accused Pretoria of abusing racial minorities in its recently released human rights report. The Ramaphosa government has slammed the report as deeply flawed and has repeatedly denied Trump's charges. South Africa is not only facing external pressure from Trump, but also internal conflict. The second biggest party in South Africa's coalition government, the Democratic Alliance, thinks that US tariffs are likely to remain until and unless the government changes some of its domestic race policies.
The issues the Trump administration has are not isolated to trade. There are geopolitical issues that they have flagged, and there are domestic issues in South Africa that they flagged. And it is very clear that while we've been negotiating on a trade track, the issues with the Trump administration are deeper than that. And these cover things like what we spoke about today in my press conference, expropriation without compensation. It deals with some of the labor laws in the country and racial legislation. But there are also broader geopolitical issues, BRICS, trade with other countries that the US regard as a threat, China and Russia, and Brazil. And these are obviously issues that are going to continue to be a problem.
While the DA has hinted at some changes in South Africa's racial policies, President Ramaphosa-led African National Congress is not likely to do it. And here's the reason. Ramaphosa's party, the ANC, swept to power in 1994 on the back of its success in ending racist white minority rule, which is why it is logical for the ANC to not change its flagship policy. Despite being at loggerheads over many issues at home, the DA has backed the Ramaphosa government's stance of still wanting to strike a trade deal with the US, saying that it will be mutually beneficial for the two countries. And shifting focus to Israel's controversial plans in Gaza. As Israel approves a widely condemned Gaza City takeover plan, it is reportedly planning to resettle Palestinians all the way in Africa. Now, Israel is reportedly in talks with South Sudan about resettling Palestinians from Gaza to the war-torn East African nation. Though the progress of these discussions remains unclear, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has recently called the relocation of Gazans the right thing to do, though he did not comment on any deal with South Sudan. The relocation plan first surfaced after US President Donald Trump surprisingly said in February that the United States would take over the Gaza Strip, proposing to temporarily move Gaza's 2 million residents while turning it into the Riviera of the Middle East. Since then, names of several African nations have emerged for the possible relocation. Egypt, Sudan, Somalia, Libya, and now South Sudan. Most have publicly rejected the idea, but South Sudan has made no public comment as of now. Reports say a US lobbying firm is working with the country, and an Israeli delegation plans to visit to assess the possibility of setting up camps for Palestinians. South Sudan is the world's youngest nation, born out of a 5-year-long civil war. As per experts, cash-strapped South Sudan needs any ally, financial gain, and diplomatic security that it can get. Such a deal could help it to strengthen ties with Israel. The country has also recently accepted third-country deportees from the US, while seeking to lift a travel ban imposed by Trump and to remove sanctions on some South Sudanese elites. But the plan to relocate Gazans has triggered serious moral and legal debate. While many Palestinians desperately seek relief from war and the hunger crisis, they firmly reject any resettlement away from what they regard as their homeland. Meanwhile, Israel's Security Cabinet has approved another military expansion, the takeover of Gaza City. Now, the operation aims to dismantle Hamas, recover remaining hostages, and to establish full Israeli security control. And as these controversial plans unfold, the question remains, who will decide the future of Gaza, and at what cost to its people? As African nations seek to modernize their militaries, many are turning to new security partners, moving away from traditional Western suppliers, from China to Turkey to the UAE. New players are entering the African arms market. In the latest, the Democratic Republic of Congo has struck a major deal with the Abu Dhabi-based International Golden Group. It is one of the UAE's leading defense suppliers. The $70 million contract covers over 100 Casa 2 mine-resistant ambush-protected vehicles built to withstand explosives and small arms fire. Some models are armed with 20mm cannons or 12.7mm machine guns, and they will be deployed in the east, where the government forces have struggled for years against dozens of armed groups. But the Rwanda-backed M23 rebel group remains a major threat, which has used guerrilla tactics and improvised explosive devices. It has captured some of the key cities in the renewed fighting since January. Some of these armoured vehicles have already been spotted on the front lines against the M23, providing critical protection for troops in mine-infested terrain and ambush zones. Now, the Casa 2 is a four-wheel drive armoured vehicle that can carry 11 troops with bulletproof and blast protection. A powerful 400 HP engine, and it can be fitted with heavy guns or a grenade launcher. It can withstand blasts from mines and improvised explosive devices, as well as from small arms. Apart from the DRC, Togo also uses it. Now, this deal shows how the UAE, like other non-Western suppliers, is boosting its presence in Africa. The UAE's defense role in Africa has rather been controversial, linked to the support of the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, fighting a brutal civil war in Sudan civil war. But Abu Dhabi's footprint goes far beyond defense. It also controls or manages ports and airports, and has invested heavily in Africa's mining and energy sectors. But the deal with the DRC also signals a harsh reality, that fear of violence still looms over the East despite the recent peace agreements. The army has again accused the Rwanda-backed M23 of launching new attacks in South Kivu. This, even after a declaration of principles was signed in July in Qatar promising a permanent ceasefire. It followed a separate peace deal between the Congolese and the Rwandan government, signed in Washington the previous month. Peace deals may have been signed, but on the ground, the fighting rages on. And with new players like the UAE supplying advanced weapons, the battlefield is changing fast. And so is the balance of power in Africa. And for our last story today, we talk about the heated dispute over Africa's largest dam. The Ethiopian dam, known as the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, is set for inauguration next month. But other Nile countries remain at odds over its impact. The Egyptian president, Abdel Fattah Al-Sisi, took a veiled dig at Ethiopia, declaring that his country will never give up its water rights. He reiterated that Cairo rejects any unilateral action on the Nile River. Now, the comments came during a press conference in Cairo with his Ugandan counterpart, Yoweri Museveni. Last month, the Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed announced that construction of the dam is complete and it will be inaugurated in September. It is a massive hydroelectric dam on the Blue Nile River. Construction started in 2011. Capacity is 6,000 megawatts, which is enough to double Ethiopia's electricity supply. But downstream, nations Egypt and Sudan opposed the dam, fearing that it will cut their share of Nile water. President Al-Sisi said that the combined annual water flow from the White and the Blue Nile is around 1,600 billion cubic meters, but most of it is lost through forests, swamps, evaporation, and groundwater. Only a small fraction reaches the Nile, and Egypt and Sudan together receive about 85 billion cubic meters, which is around 4% of the total. Egypt relies heavily on this for its freshwater needs. Now, Ethiopia has tried to calm fears, saying that the dam is a shared opportunity, but Cairo remains unconvinced and continues to raise objections. There have been over a dozen formal rounds of talks since 2011, all failing to produce a final agreement. In fact, US President Donald Trump recently claimed to have solved the issue between Egypt and Ethiopia, as he suggested he deserves a Nobel Prize. Now, Trump also claimed that the dam was built with United States money, largely, a statement that Ethiopia has rejected as false and destructive. An ally of President Al-Sisi, Trump said that the dam significantly reduces water flow into the Nile. In 2020, he even suggested the dam should be blown up, but has now declared peace has been achieved. But with President Al-Sisi's latest remarks, it seems the dispute is far from over. As the inauguration date draws closer, will this issue blow up or not? We'll be watching every step of the way. And that's it on the show for today. We will see you again tomorrow at the same time. Thank you for watching, and goodbye. Hello and welcome to Firstpost Spotlight, where we bring you stories that matter to you from all across the world. From breaking news to the day